I'm delighted to be here today, ma'am, with you because it is so fascinating to speak with somebody who's been a pioneer in the world of business. And as a woman leader, your role has really been inspirational to all of us. And especially now that the world is transforming, where we are talking so much more about sustainability, climate change, and the fact that we need to move towards a net zero world. Do you really think that business can hold ground on this? And it's not just policy, but business and how business transforms itself that needs to be an instrument of change.
I completely believe in that, completely believe in that. And I think Mark Benioff, who's the founder of our company, he's a person who's always told everybody. And in fact, the premise on which he started this business was to make it a platform of change. So he completely believes that business should be a platform of change. And we have tried to live our values through our work. And one of the ways we do that is, we have a one by one policy, meaning that we contribute 1% of equity or profits to the nonprofit sector every year. We contribute 1% of our products for the use by nonprofit sector, and we contribute 1% of our employees' time to doing voluntary work. And I think the last one is most impressive, because if you ask me what is most important is time. And to give time off to our employees, paid time off for 1 week to our employees to go and do their voluntary work, I think that is something that's really very impressive. But more than that, through all of the other initiatives that we have taken throughout, we've seen business as a platform for change. For instance, Mark committed that the company would be net zero by 2050. Since the Paris Agreement. But in 2017 itself, we were proud to hit net zero operations, and we started delivering to all our customers a carbon neutral cloud. Then in 2019, we included all the emissions from things like business travel and employee commuting. And I am very proud to say just about 2 months back, we announced that Salesforce is a net zero company right now. Okay. So we are not waiting for 2030 or 2040 in order to put in our investments. We are doing it right now. We are also proud to announce that we've reached 100% renewable energy for our operations this year. So we've been working on this for almost a decade by investing in wind farms and solar projects all around the world. And we believe that, this is something that's very necessary. We have to act very boldly if we are to keep the 1.5 degree target that we were talking about in Glasgow.
That's really impressive work from Salesforce, and I think there's a lot to learn for other software companies from Salesforce. But when I speak to organizations, and we do a lot of work with manufacturing companies, services companies, and financial services companies, your earlier organization as well. So now a lot of the manufacturing companies have understood the fact that emissions need to be curtailed.
Mm-hmm.
But services organizations, in my view, and because I speak to so many of them, don't seem to understand that they actually have a carbon footprint. They don't really get that perspective. And as an organization that can actually influence change, because you seem to live the perspective around net zero and sustainability, how do you feel that this transformation in the services sector can be brought about?
So, as you first said, there is this awareness that has to be there. In a way, if you look at it, the cloud companies themselves are reducing carbon footprint because running a server on-prem is not the most efficient way of using of a server, because a server has to be scoped for the peak load that you're going to get, right? Now, if you are on the cloud instead, actually speaking, you don't need to always buy peak load, and you can increase your requirements of server capacity depending upon when your peak load is coming. And if you're in a public cloud, then there is far greater utilization of the server time than if you have it on-prem. So, a carbon footprint of a cloud implementation is far less than the carbon footprint of an on-prem implementation. So that itself can sort of separate out how a services company is doing things. Like I told you, in 2019, we added all of the emissions that were taking place as a result of the travel of not only our people across the world, but even commuting to office. Okay. So there is a way in which we can do all of this so that we reduce the carbon footprint. During the pandemic, we saw a live experiment whereby, because of the lockdown, people stayed at home and you could actually see, the weather outside, the air outside improving because there were less cars on the road and we were able to work remotely. Now, a services company, again, that accepts the remote model and agrees that, we cannot be remote all the time. I agree to that as well, because collaboration is so much a part of what we do. And therefore, it's important to have the human touch, the human collaboration. But do we need to all commute back to office on a daily basis? I don't think that's necessary. So, we have to slowly migrate to a hybrid state where we collaborate and get together when it's necessary, but we continue to work out of office and we don't use cars and modes of transport so much because they're all emitting gases which add to the greenhouse effect. So I think, services companies definitely need to be aware that just by running of the systems that they run, by ensuring that hundreds and thousands of people are commuting to office on a daily basis and returning, that all of this has a definite carbon imprint, and they need to work on ensuring that we try and negate it. By the way, let me tell you that even in my earlier organization, this was very well understood. And in fact, the chairman before mine, Mr. Bhatt, was the person who first, bought windmills, actually. And during my time, I tried to replicate that. And we didn't get permission from the central bank because the Banking Regulation Act says that the bank can't be a generator of electricity. Now, that's something that was relevant, in the late 40s. It's not relevant today, and we are not generating electricity. We are merely trying to negate our carbon footprint. So we went the other way. So all of our buildings, by the way, are green buildings, the ones that we were putting up then. We used the buildings which had space on the rooftop to use solar cells over there, the solar panels over there, in order to generate solar electricity and reduce, again, the carbon footprint that we have. So I think it's not right to paint the entire services sector with the same brush and say that none of us realize that we are having a carbon footprint. But yes, definitely the awareness is low. And the only way awareness can come up is through conferences like this, through articles like this, and by people really taking the lead, the leaders understanding and taking the lead in ensuring that they are bringing down their footprint.
And I really agree with you when you said that, awareness is one very big issue. Because at the moment we are in the process of, the greatest change that the world has ever seen as compared to the great industrial revolution. Because the changes that are being brought about because of the shift to newer forms of energy will have cross-cutting impacts. But the second biggest shift is that of digital transformation. And digital transformation, as you pointed out, has accelerated in the last 2 years. Ever since the pandemic hit us, there has been, of course, changes in how we work. And every single thing is now digital. So we are going to see a further acceleration in this. Also, what we're going to see is new technologies coming up. So AR is going to come up, VR is going to come up. We are in certain parts of the world also talking about 5G emerging very soon. So there is a confluence of factors that are there. So at one level, we have to look at sustainability at a very serious level. At, at the second stage, we need to look at technology very, very seriously, but the footprint of technology needs to reduce dramatically so that we actually get the benefits that are needed. But this entire thing is also a people based transformation. Would you agree?
I fully agree that it is a people based transformation because it is again a mindset that we are talking about. And the mindset has to first accept that there is a problem. And unless and until they accept that the problem is not only serious, but it's also immediate, you won't see the type of action that is required to maintain that 1.5-degree goal that we have set. It's a very important goal, and we are seeing it on a daily basis. We are seeing it in climate changes. We are seeing it in the kind of natural disasters and calamities that are happening on a daily basis. We can't allow this to go on, you know. We, after all, need to leave a world which is sustainable for our children. And if we don't take action now, it's going to be very difficult. Now, as I said, awareness, and awareness means people, and the appreciation of people about how urgent this is. I think most people understand it, but they still feel that there is nothing that they themselves need to contribute to it. Now that needs to go away. And maybe, I'm not sure this is the right thing to say, but maybe initially, you know, it has to be mandated. Because what doesn't happen on its own sometimes happens faster if things are mandated. For instance, how many companies are doing their sustainability reporting in their annual balance sheets? How do we mandate it? How do we ensure that we have the technology to give the right inputs? For instance, Salesforce has a sustainability cloud and a sustainability solution for companies, but it does certain limited things. It does your carbon accounting for you, but there is so much more to do rather than just carbon accounting. In fact, just the other day, you know, I received a proposal from the Isha Foundation regarding soil and how important it was to maintain the quality of our soil, because it is soil that gives you the food that you eat. And if the amount of soil that we are degrading right now, if that rate of degradation goes on, then there will come a time when the world will go from being food surplus to food negative. Okay, and that is not something that we want to see happen. So there are so many practices that ensure that the soil degradation happens at a very fast pace. For instance, in India today, we still have things like flood irrigation. Now, flood irrigation is absolutely one of the worst things that you can do, because you're using so much of water, you are depleting the groundwater, you are allowing that water to run off with the topsoil into the water bodies nearby. Now, as a result, what you are doing is, because the soil is degrading, you're using more and more fertilizer, and those fertilizers are getting washed into the water bodies. What that is doing is, more than silting up the water bodies, it is also creating, you know, various kinds of weeds in the water bodies, like water hyacinth and things like that, which chokes up the water bodies, and slowly they become shallower, so that, you know, the groundwater recharging also goes further down, and slowly the soil becomes barren. That's how the soil gets degraded. So, you know, instead of flood irrigation, you need a little more investment to do what is called fertigation. That means you use, you know, the pipes that allow only drops of water to go in at the very root of the crops, and therefore you use less fertilizer, you use less oil, and you do not degrade the soil. So there are so many ways in which, you know, this whole matter can be pushed. It is not only the carbon emission, it is a way of ensuring that you have a sustainable environment. And for that, you need participation of one and all. It cannot be done by corporates alone. It cannot be done by government alone. It has to be a point where individuals become aware of how they are sort of contributing to the degradation of the environment. In fact, you know, I have a cousin who's a great activist in this area, and she just was WhatsApping me that, do you know that every single toothbrush that you have used up to date is still there in this world.
Is still there. Can you imagine?
Can
I
you
just
imagine?
wrote about that some time
Yeah.
back. It's
So the
incredible.
thing is, that's an unimaginable kind of situation. Means, how do you pollute the planet in this manner? So we have got to do a lot, there is a lot to be done in a lot many ways if we are looking at sustainability in its true sense. And if we are looking at a world that will continue to sustain its population. And on top of that, while it needs investment, it needs technology, it needs a broader vision. It is not only each nation for itself. We've seen during the pandemic how it spread right across the world. Okay. And no nation fighting on its own can stop it. It has to stop, by the whole thing being stopped globally.
Needs
That's the only,
collaboration, because that's really why these,
that's right.
so many of these variants are coming up. So,
Mhm.
do you think really this is a time where we are going to be prioritizing collaboration versus individual achievements? At its very core, I've somehow been thinking about it that sustainability as a challenge is one of me first. I want everything all the time for me and myself, and I don't care about anything else. But the challenges that we are seeing now are challenges of systems, you know. So there is the water system that we've taken in isolation and forgotten about it. The air system, we've forgotten about it. The biodiversity, we've forgotten about it. We somehow don't seem to think that they are all interlinked. And that's the problem with organizations also. We've divided our organizations into single departments. But ESG is about environmental, social, and governance issues. So, which again means an interlinking. So, overall, we sort of, in this desire to specialize and super specialize, we've forgotten this entire concept of systems thinking and the fact that we need to think together of how this needs to be addressed. And perhaps the last 2 years have really led us to this path to say that the me first philosophy is not going to work anymore.
No, I fully agree with you there. Means, I couldn't be more in agreement. And I really feel that, unless and until there's more understanding between the several nations, whether they be developed, developing, or the poorer nations, and there is a equitable distribution amongst all of these in respect of technology, in respect of investment capacity, we are going to degrade the world at a point when there'll be no turning back. Before that happens, we need people to commit to this, to understand that what is going on is the reality. That you see so many diseases that are happening in these days, which are totally unexplainable. One of the biggest class of diseases is the immune system diseases, where the body turns in on itself. And why should that be happening if it had not been for pollution? When your own body attacks you, it's not even anything outside of the body. The body is getting, all kinds of allergies and immunity problems because of because of the issues that we have with the environment. Means, I can see right behind you, these trees called mother-in-law's tongue. These are
Yeah,
supposed to be excellent
I
trees,
stay in
for
I stay in Gurgaon. I have to have these at home. I
yeah,
mean, every room has at
these
least
are
5 or 6 of these
good.
pots.
These are very good for purification of internal air,
Hmm.
right? So,
Absolutely.
so you are obviously a very aware individual, but Namrata, we need to get this awareness to every single person. Unless and until people believe that there is a world outside and all of us are responsible for it, it's going to be very, very difficult to manage this.
What do you think is the role of women in in this transformation?
So I think, if you look at the role of women in most matters, the thing is, where a woman is concerned, her instinct leads her to be more cautious about her family and her uh, you know, she thinks outside of herself most of the time. That's how women are, because they have to protect the weak and the frail. They have to bring up children, and their instincts make them think outside of themselves. I think that's a beginning. That's the beginning. When you begin to think outside of yourself, you are not doing things for yourself, you are doing things for family. But slowly, this family needs to expand. That way, I don't think there is anything better than what is said in our philosophy, that is Vasudeva Kutumbakam. So, the world is your, everybody is a part of your world, rather. Okay. So the whole of the world is basically your relative or your family. Okay. And I think that's where we need to go. Now, it's not again going to happen suddenly. We need to make small beginnings, and small beginnings have been made. But the first beginning is, of course, it starts with awareness. So even at the school level, how much are we teaching our children that these are the sustainable practices? Just as we used to have moral science when we were back in school, I think, these are subjects when we teach environmental science to our even class 2, class 3 students. What we need to really teach them is the need to be environmentally friendly, to ensure that you are not displacing others in order to make a space for yourself, because you are as much dependent on those others as they are on you. It's like the flapping of the butterfly's wings, as it's so important. But the fact is that this importance is something that some people have realized, others are unaware, and others are just not bothered. Now, we've got to change that. Sometimes it has to happen by mandate, as I said, because, there's no other way of doing it as quickly as you would like to. But it is a joint effort that needs to be done, and every individual's effort matters. There were these WhatsApp posts that came around, regarding snipping off the milk cartons corners, and how those little corners are causing so much trouble. Okay. And how to dispose of it within the packet itself, so that, they don't unnecessarily go and clog up all kinds of things. Little things like that, they are small things, but they make, when you take it in entirety and in totality, they make a big, big difference. So, we have to understand that there are many nations that don't have the wherewithal to either put in the research or the investment that is required. I talked about fertigation. Fertigation actually means that you have to lay out the pipes, right? You have to make an investment on the land to allow for drip irrigation. Drip irrigation costs money. There is an investment to it. If the farmers don't have that money, we have to find it from someplace. Because at the end of the day, they do flood irrigation. Why? Because they don't have to use that money. Electricity comes to them free. So they'll switch it on at night when they go to bed, and they switch it off in the morning when they wake up. Imagine the amount of waste and the amount of degradation of the environment that is happening because of this. Now, instead of doing all of those free, if you made them paid and instead gave them money to lay out the drip irrigation, that would be a far better and a more sustainable way of doing things, right? So we've got to think through what we are doing, why we are doing it, what will have the maximum impact in the long run, and shape our initiatives in that manner.
Ma'am, it's been fascinating speaking to you, and there are many things that I've learned from this really rich conversation. And to summarize, I'd like to say first, we've got to collaborate with each other. The small things really matter. Systems really hold the key, and systems thinking really needs to be built up in everybody, including our children. So, environmental sciences, how these matter, what they relate to, and also the fact that we need to live values driven lives. Our values matter, they matter more than anything else to this world. A pleasure speaking to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Same here. Thank you.